How's it going? We're going to be going through how to, as the title suggested, create a file upload server. This can be using Docker and localhost mostly, but you could easily deploy this onto your favorite container registry of choice and then host it. And the idea is just to give us an endpoint to upload our files to, and then we can also get them, and just do a nice exercise with Node and Express and TypeScript and all of that good stuff. I'm doing this mostly unscripted. I have got a clipboard snippings that I'm going to be going through, so you don't have to watch me type stuff out, but that's about it. So let's just get right into it and not waste any time. First thing I'm going to do is npm init, and I'm just going to go yes, because I'm sure that'll be fine. Okay, so npm install, and I want Express, Multer, Sharp, TS Node, and TypeScript. So we're going to install all of these dependencies. I try to work with as few dependencies as possible, but for especially with Sharp, it's doing a lot of file compression. So I didn't really want to write that by hand. Now we're going to do our dev dependencies. Pretty sure you can do npm I as well. So biggest things are going to be our types. So we want types for Express. We want types for Multer, and I also want, that's it. And basically we know that these are dev dependencies because we don't actually need these to go into our finished product. Excellent. So now that we have all the dependencies installed, we're going to go and do a TypeScript init. And now we can see we have this tsconfig.json file here, which is very good and exactly what we want. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to create firstly we're going to do some bash practice. So I'm going to go ahead and create a source directory, and I'm going to chuck a server.ts file in there. And this is where all of our code is going to go regarding the actual server itself. So I like to separate my imports so it's really nice to understand. So our native node imports are going to be from path, which is for the file system, and fs, which is also for the file system, but they give us slightly different things. And then the third-party imports that we grabbed from before are going to be Express, next function, request, and response. This is quite literally like a HTTP request that has come to the server, a HTTP response which comes out of the server and back to the requesting client. And the next function is what we use for middleware. I am going to do one example of middleware in this project because I think it will be nice to cover for anyone that hasn't touched middleware before or would like a brush up. So that's all fine and good. And Multer is the third-party package, which is going to basically ingest the file when we send it as a part of form data, which is good. Now what we want to do, we just want to go and grab the app, which is equal, so we're going to create an instance of an Express application, and then we're going to open up a port. Now for the port stuff, we can either specify an environment variable called port, which we will do later, or it will default to 3000 if it doesn't find one. Next thing I want to do is just so we can all make sure we're all on the same page, we're going to do a really simple app.get. This get is so a normal HTTP request is typically a get, and that's when you get a web page, for example. This is going to the root of the server, so we won't have to actually give it a URL, just where the server lives. We're not actually doing anything with the request, but we are going to send a response back to the client, which is just going to be hello world. Now, if we do anything with this, it won't work. So what we're going to have to do is now actually activate the server itself, which is just going to be app.listen. We're going to give it the port from earlier, and I'll show you how this works in a second, followed by console.log, and just so we can see that it actually works. Excellent. So now from here, I'm going to head back into PowerShell. I'm going to do ts-node, which we installed before, and we're going to go to source. I'm going to tab to autocomplete. I'm going to go server and start the server. Excellent. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Postman, which is here. Here's one I prepared earlier. So we can go into here and localhost 3000. And like I said before, because we're just doing this simple slash, we don't actually need to give it any more information. If I hit send, we'll get hello world, which tells us that this is working for us, which is excellent. So I'm going to hide Postman again because you don't need to see it right now. So that's all good. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a post route. So the syntax for this is very similar to the app.get, which I'm now going to get rid of. You're more than welcome to keep it in if you find you have server issues later. Now, for this, instead of giving it nothing, we're going to go to the upload page. And the way that post actually differs from get is basically get is saying, give me information, and post is saying, I have information to give you. So that's the big difference there. So you will see we have two red squiggly lines. Now upload actually comes from Multer, but we've not configured this yet. And check file valid MW. MW is short for middleware. And basically what this is going to do is make sure that a file was actually sent to the server from the client being the user. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to first fix the upload issue. So I'm going to come in here, and I've already defined one. So we're going to invoke this Multer. We're going to create an instance of the class. If that all sounds scary, don't worry. This is just how we tell our app that we actually want to use Multer. And we're going to say that the storage, the way that it handles its storage is equal to a function called Multer storage. What is Multer storage? Well, it's not here yet. We have to go to const and bring it in. So I'm going to walk through this. You can start to see it's starting to look a little scary, but it's all good. We'll walk through it. So what we've got here is we're saying, all right, Multer, I want you to save all of the things according to what I give you in this destination. Okay. So what this is saying is, and again, we have some more red squiggles, but we're going to fix that in just a moment. So let's go through, and we're going to have when we receive a file from this Multer, so this is all getting like invoked here, which actually happens before anything else. So how this is going to work is the client will send a file. The file will then go through this upload function, which is using this like sort of configuration, I guess we can call it, for the like these settings for the sake of making it as easy as possible. And this just tells it where do we want the file to be saved that the client has sent to the server, and what do we want to call it. Okay. Now on the uploaded file, it actually has a bunch of different properties on it, and we can see that by heading into file dot. So these are all the different things that we have available to us. And so all I'm really interested for the sake of this exercise is original name. So if I sent it, for example, if I sent it the file of test1.jpg or .jpeg, that original name will be test1.jpeg. Like, it's very literal. So we're actually going to go and create a function to separate test1 and .jpeg into two separate things. So we can change what happens inside of the application depending on if the user sends a .jpeg or a .png or a .gif, and it will make our lives a lot easier. Excellent. So this is where that base is coming from, and we haven't actually defined this pass file name yet. That's fine. We're going to get to that. This fs promises. So this fs is coming from our import up here. This is a native node library. And basically what we want to do is we want to create a directory in the file system. And I also want to make sure that we only try and save to the directory that we create after it's been created, which is what this .then is doing for us. Because otherwise we're going to get issues with race conditions, and it's going to try and create a file in somewhere where it doesn't exist yet, and all sorts of not very good things. So this path.join is going to save us the headache of trying to keep track of backslash and forward slash. And I'm just going to give it an assortment of strings, and it's going to do all of that for us. So where it's going to save is just to an uploads folder. And it's going to take the base file name of the file that was uploaded. So in our previous example, this would be test1, sorry. Recursive is just saying, so for example, if I gave it images slash test slash another test, it's actually going to create all of those files instead of failing, because we're trying to create subdirectories inside of directories that don't exist yet. Excellent. So when this is finished, what we're going to then do is we're going to say, okay, save the file, this file, in the uploads folder. Actually, I probably could have used path here. The uploads folder, and then with the base name. So again, that would be test1 in that example. So that's excellent. We're actually now going to go and create the pass file name function. So what that's going to look like is I'm just going to hop back into Bash, and I'm going to make a directory of source, or of util inside of source, and then a pass file name.ts file. Excellent. We can see that here. Now what we also need to do is we need to go and import that, but first we should probably define what it is. So in here, the only things we're going to need are the path. So again, that's a native import. The actual function itself. So we're going to say, if anyone tries to use this file, we're just going to give them this by default, right? So we don't actually need them to specify what they want. This is what it will give them. And I'm just going to import the path from path up here to get rid of the red squiggles. So in here, we're just saying all this function needs is a full name. And this is the full name of the file, which is a string. And we have strings because this is TypeScript, not JavaScript. And then we're going to return an object, and that object will have a base, which is a string, which will be our test1, and it will have an ext, which is short for extension, which is also a string, which will be .jpeg. Okay, and so all we're going to do in here is use the path library that we have access to, courtesy of Node. I'm going to say, all right, path between the full name and the extension of full name. So it will figure out all of that out for us. Just give me the base name, and that becomes our base. And then for extension, we're going to say, okay, path, just give me the extension of full name. So it's smart enough to figure out the last dot and then get the file type. And I mean, you could do this by hand with string.split on the dot, and then, you know, getting the last one and then getting everything after that. But this is just much cleaner. You definitely can do it that way, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to do it this way. So that's all good. And now I'm going to define some custom utilities. And this is going to be an import of parse file name from util parse file name. And now we can see those red squiggles are gone, which is exactly what we want. So how I'm going to separate this out, this is going to be like a little config section. So everything related to config goes up there. Everything down here is going to be our routes, which is good. This is going to be instantiation, which is good. And then I'm actually going to have a little middleware section as well. So this check file valid PW is going to be a very small example of middleware, but I do think it's good to constantly remind ourselves that middleware is a thing that we can use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, paste my function in, and then I'll explain it line by line. Excellent. So in here, we can see there's the function name. That's how we're using it. And then we're getting the request. So what has been sent to the server. We're getting access to the response, as in what we're going to send back to the user if we need to, and next. So what next does is it says, hey, after we've done this thing, go and do the actual work of this route. And so before, what was inside of this like quote unquote actual work section was the like sending back of hello world. I understand this is probably a little bit confusing if this is your first time seeing Express, but yeah, take my word for it. Excellent. So now that we have this, all we're doing is, so we actually, this upload.single file will check in the uploaded, and I will provide an example. We'll go back to Postman in a second to make sure this is all working. And so we'll actually say on the form, when what we send to the server, we're going to give it like a title of file. And so it's saying, hey, find the file that is actually like attached to the field called file, because all the forms are key value pairs. So that's going to grab that, and it's actually going to attach to the request little, I'm going to call it an object here, which again is what is being sent to the server, this file property. And so this file property, what we're going to do is, because this check file is valid, is occurring after this upload stuff that has been provided to us by Multer, we're saying, hey, check that the request does actually have a file. So in the event that it doesn't have a file, which is what this little exclamation mark is indicative of, it says this is false, or double pipe, if it doesn't have a file name. And so it doesn't have a file name could be literally it doesn't have a file name, it's undefined. Null, if it is an empty string, it would also trigger this condition. And what that's going to do is it's going to send back to the user a 400 bad request. And I will demonstrate that once we get back into Postman. And then return, so it won't do anything else. Now, if this doesn't happen, what we're going to do is just go next, which is going to go again to the actual function handling the request, which is what we want. So that's all good. It's very basic. Not a lot to much else to say really. So what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to again copy over into my upload function what the actual work that we want to do. So I'm going to use what is called object deconstruction inside of JavaScript, and that is basically saying, hey, instead of doing like const file is equal to rec.file, we can just get it directly like this. So this is object deconstruction. I definitely recommend having a look into it because it's quite interesting and really powerful once you get a handle on it. And we will be using it later on in this video as well, which is all good. For the sake of testing and demonstrating that this does work, I'm going to actually console.log the file that gets sent in, and we're just going to send back to the client that the file was uploaded successfully. Okay, let's hop back into Node, and now I'm going to stop this and restart it. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to hop back into Postman. I'm going to show Postman in OBS. So this is, again, what we had before. I'm actually going to go to my post now. And so, you know what? I will show you how to get this by scratch. So if we go into Postman and we have our local host 3000 upload, and again, this 3000 is because we have 3000 here. If you have defined a different port, you will need to accommodate for that in your Postman. Well, in your request, whether you use Postman or not is completely up to you. Excellent. So now we're going to go to body. We're going to go to form data. And so this is what I was talking about when I was talking about key value pairs earlier and where this file value is actually coming from. So what I'm going to do in my form, I'm going to create a key of file because that's what the route is looking for. And I'm going to say that is equal to a file value inside of Postman. Now we're going to go to value, select files, and I've got a GIF, a PNG, and a JPEG here for the sake of demonstration. I'm actually going to use this JPEG file that I've grabbed from Unsplash, which is a fantastic stock image repository. If you need stock images, they're really good. It's also really large. So the next example of how we're going to implement compression. Wow, my microphone has gotten incredibly loud. I don't know how long that's been doing that for. I hope I don't need to record everything, re-record everything. Why did it do that? Properties? That's really strange. So we're going to use our Unsplash. So yeah, so the reason why I'm using this large Unsplash file is because when I show you how to do the compression, it's a really good example of how much we can get things compressed. So let's do this. We're going to double click. That has saved the file to my form under the key of file. And now I'm going to send my request. Also make sure this is a post. So see how this post matches this post? That's exactly what we want. Alrighty, we're going to send. Excellent, it all works. So we can see here, as I was showing you earlier, all of this is in that file object, and this is where we're getting the original name from. So we can see here, unsplash.jpg is the original name, okay? And as we can see in this file name section, so we've said, all right, we'll call the file inside of uploads. Actually, this is probably a good example of when to discuss this. So we have a folder created called uploads. We then have another folder, like a subdirectory, which is the base of the file name. and then I'm creating the file, which is called full, and we want to make sure it matches the extension, which is why I'm using this extension, getting the extension from a past file name here. Okay, so now we can see if I click on here, it will show the full image. I apologize, we still have Postman up. Let's get rid of that. So we have the full image here, which is great. That means it worked. Awesome. We can see the size, we can see where it got saved, all this different stuff. And the reason why I'm using full is because next what we're going to work on is actually compressing the file so that we don't have... in my project, I want a full and a minified version, because when a user loads a post preview, I want to show the minimum, for example, but if they actually click on the image, I want to load the full image so they can get all of the detail. Awesome. So that is our latest sanity check. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to implement another route to get a file. Okay. So we've got app.get. And so in here, this is actually a dynamic route. And so what that means is it will depend on what the user puts in. Well, they can put whatever they want for this section of the route. So if I typed in, instead of /upload, I did /unsplash.jpg. That is the value that this route would be. And then we're going to do some logic based on that. Okay. So the way we're actually going to access this file name value that we've used is by going const file name is equal to rec.params, specifically params. And so what this is saying, you can also do this by const file name equals rec.params.filename, but again, we're using object deconstruction to make our lives a little bit, I don't know, I prefer it, I think it's cleaner. Now, we're also going to use object deconstruction to grab the base name and the extension of the past file name. So in the case of unsplash.jpg, base would be unsplash, and the extension would be obviously .jpg. Awesome. Next, we need to actually get out, so now we're in the context of this function, but the problem is that our uploads folder doesn't live in the source folder where our code does. It actually lives in the uploads folder. So we need to say, okay, we'll get the directory name of the current directory, which this code is running in, which will be our file upload server -tutorial in my case. One thing that we're going to add a little bit later on, but not quite yet, I'll keep it in anyway. It won't break anything because of the way that it's been written. So what this does is when we do implement our compression, we want to be able to access the minimum, and we also want to be able to access the full version. So what we've done is we're going to take our extension from up here, and again, the reason why I'm saving these as full and min inside of the actual folder, which is called the file name, is so that it makes grabbing the correct one really easy. Now do notice rec.params and rec.query are different things. The reason for this, if I head back into Postman, I'm going to explain it now while we're here. Here is the example when it starts working, and we're not here yet, so don't worry if yours doesn't. This is just normal. So this unsplash.jpg, because it's a dynamic route, and again, that's the colon file name there, we can use the rec.params to grab the file name. The query, however, and you'll see this a lot in, I've noticed websites like Kayak and different travel websites and things like that. Lots of websites. If you haven't noticed, you definitely will after this. In the URL, you'll see question marks and ampersands and all these crazy things. And what that is this little size equals min. And so we can access that separately as using query. And again, if you really wanted to, you could do something like size in here, for example, right? And then you just go into file name and you'd do size like this. And then you could do exactly the same thing. It just means in the URL, you'll need another /. For the sake of demonstrating queries in this exercise, I went with query. So it's completely up to you. Do whatever makes you happy. That's all fine and good. So next what we're going to do is actually declare the file path, which is here. I'm actually going to move this out up to here. So all of our stuff is together and it's semi-logical. So the file path is, again, we're using the path library. We're going to say grab the parent directory here, and then we want to go to the uploads folder. Then we want to go to the base name, which in our case is unsplash, and we want to get the size if it's there. So if size hasn't been declared, we're actually using a ternary operator, which is just a nicer and cleaner way than using if else. So like, for example, if we were to do this as a if else statement, it would look like this. It'll be kind of gross. So let's size, and we'll have like a default. Actually, no, I'm going to do the really gross way, and then I'll do the little bit gross way. So we'll have let's size, which is like now equal to nothing, which is a bit scary. And then we'll say if rec.query.size is equal to min. I already hate this. We're going to do size equal to min. Otherwise, else, size is equal to full. And then obviously you have your your extension here. I'm not going to do that because I don't like it. So yeah, we're going to get rid of that. So ternary is just a nicer and cleaner way of separating that. Sometimes if it's a particularly long line, you will see people do this sort of thing, but I don't think it's really long enough to warrant that. So we can just grin and bear it. And again, like if I haven't actually used object destructuring here, I could have just done this. No, not that, literally the other way around. Oh, actually, no, you can't. Cut all of that. Cut everything that I just said. I'm a liar. We can't use destructuring because we're doing ternary on it. I was wondering why I didn't use destructuring. That's why. Excellent. So now, last piece of the puzzle for this, and it will be a little bit scary, is... Okay. So all this is doing is it's saying, hey, file system, try to access the thing that we've just said we want to go to, which in this case is the file upload server tutorial directory, then uploads, then the base file name, and then size, which is either going to be min or it's going to be full. Okay. So in our case, I've defaulted to full because, I don't know, you can default to min if you prefer. That's all fine and good. So if it doesn't find it, and so this is saying, go check this file path. If you find it, if you do not find it, run this function. So this function is going to send a 400 bad request. It's going to tell us it was unable to find our file, and then it will return so that this route is done, like it won't try to do anything else. If it does find it, it will just send the file, okay? So let's demo that. I realize that it's probably the most confusing part that we've done so far. So I'm going to head back into Postman. I'm going to show Postman to you guys. So we can say in here, okay, fantastic. Actually, this would be a good example. We don't currently have a min. So if I try and do size equal to min, we'll get an unable to find unsplash.jpg. And I'm just now realizing that's probably not the best. That should probably say unable to find unsplash/min.jpg, but you get the idea. If we get rid of this, however, I'm going to do it this way. We can see, okay, it does actually return the image, and we can see it's returned a nearly 3 megabyte image, and it took 10 milliseconds on localhost, which is like not good. Particularly if you're not on localhost and you're going over the wild west of the internet, that is like quite awful. But we can see here, it is in fact the image that I uploaded, and everything is working as it should, which is fantastic. Now, if I head into upload and I instead upload my Nichijo GIF instead, and I hit send, and I come over here, we can see already uploads now has Nichijo and Unsplash. So we head into Nichijo and we can see full.gif, and there is our GIF, which is awesome. And if I head back into Postman and I go, okay, don't give me unsplash.jpg, give me nichijo.gif. And we can see that's actually loaded for us, which is really good and cool. Like all the things are working as they should be, which is great. So now we're going to implement compression, which probably sounds a lot more intimidating than it really is. It's not too bad. thankfully we have sharp, which is a dependency that we installed before, which is actually going to take care of like most of the work for us. So with our little sanity check over, I'm going to head back into bash, and I'm going to, this thing here, what it's doing is I'm going to create a directory of types inside of source, and then I'm going to create inside of types a media.type.ts file, and I'll explain that code after we get into it. So we can see here media type is equal to, and so what this is doing is basically, this is a TypeScript way, one of many ways to create not really an enum, but like a very controlled list of possible values. So what this is doing is basically saying, like, at this point in time, this application is only going to support PNG, JPEG, WebP, and GIF files. And we'll see exactly how that comes to play in a little bit. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go and basically implement the compression. So inside of our upload, because we don't want the user to have to post twice, so we're going to do this inside of upload. There's a really, really nice function that we can use called res.on. And res.on, what that does, I'm actually going to refactor this, possibly. No, I'll leave it. Okay, so again, we have squiggles. That's all fine and good. Actually, this I can fix right now. So I'm going to do control and full stop. I'm going to update my import from types and media type. Excellent. That's one squiggle down. And we can see here, where did it put that? Here we go. So I'm going to just do types up here. So all of our types will import that way. So we do have two functions that we haven't implemented yet, but I'm going to walk you through the idea and what we're doing. So if the file is valid, now this is more just to get rid of squiggles. We know the file is already valid because of this check file valid middleware function that we've been using. So that's all fine and good. Then what we're going to do is we're going to, again, use object destructuring to destructure the return value of this prepare file details. And all prepare file details is going to do is basically separate the, again, base name and the extension. You could just do this directly inside of the function, but I like to separate things as much as possible, because in the event that I want to change how file details are prepared, then it's just one place that I need to change that. And then what we're going to get to is res.on. So if you're familiar with using JavaScript in a front-end environment, you're probably aware of on-click events and on-change events and key up and key down and mouse over and all these cool and beautiful things, which are event listeners. So res.on is basically an event listener for the response object. And again, the response is what we send back to the client. So what we're saying is, when the response finishes, as in it's like sent back its thing, we want to run this compress image function. And so the user response is not in any way tied to the compress image function. We can do that in the background, or the user just needs to know the file was uploaded, which is why we're doing it this way. Okay, so that's all very fun and exciting. What we're going to do next is we're going to go and define this prepare file details utility function. So I'm going to hop in here. I'm going to go prepare file details.ts. And here is one that I prepared earlier. So two things we'll need is path and pass file name. And then I also am going to need the actual function definition. Let's go through this. So we're again using object deconstruction from the pass file name to just grab the base name and extension, which we've done many times already. We're then going to go and grab the full file path, which is going to be uploads, which is our uploads folder. Like if you call this something else, you will need to probably change a lot of where I've used the word uploads. Probably could have used a variable instead of uploads, but that's okay. This is for demonstrative purposes only. We then have the base file name, and we have full, which, you know, we already know that. That's all fine and good. This is very similar to what we've done before. And we're going to say compressed file path is now actually equal to min. Okay. And this is then going to return a, just realizing now, and the beautiful thing about recording is like we don't need quality in here. And I'll show you why in a second. So that's all fun and good. We've done that. So we're just returning the, basically, because what we're going to send this to the compression library, and we're saying, where does the file come from? Like, where's the original full file? And where do we want to save the compressed version? So again, I want to save it in uploads. I then want to save it under the file name and min, because that, to my brain, is like the easiest way to organize them. Okay, and we're also going to return the extension as a separate thing as well. So we know what kind of things we can do to the file, because the compression algorithms actually change depending on file type. They don't have to, but if you apply a JPEG compression to a PNG file, it's really ugly. So that's why we're doing that. So the reason why I got rid of that little quality number before is because I was actually passing it here, but it's like super unnecessary. Because it doesn't get used in that function. So we can just pass it here instead. Now I'm using 20, which is like really aggressive. So 100 would be no compression, right? And then, 50 would be like, oh, compress it 50%. 20 is like compress it 80%, not compress it 20. Well, yeah, compress it to 20% of its original size. We're getting a size reduction of 80%, which is like really, it's a lot. But again, for my specific use case, where I'm like using this in like a post preview, where the image is like really small, to not clutter up a home feed, like it makes sense for my use case. You might want to change this. And this should probably also be a variable somewhere else instead of a magic number. But that's all good. So we have prepare file details, and I'm going to do a control period so we can get this little add import shortcut. I can get rid of that because we took it out of our return statement. And the last thing we have is the compress image function. So let's go and do that. So we have new file, compress image.ts. This will also be pretty quick. So Sharp is one of the things that we installed ages ago, if you can remember back that long. We haven't used it yet because it is specifically for compression, like media compression. And media type is the types that we defined before, which is here. So the PNG, JPEG, WebP, and .gif. So that's all fine and good. We're going to copy and paste my function definition in here, and you'll be glad to learn that this is the last one. So let's go through this because it's really not that scary. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap everything in a try block. So just in case anything fails, we're going to log an error to the console, and you might want to do something else for this. But for the sake of demonstrating, like, this is perfectly fine. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to import this, get rid of our squiggle. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab where does the original file live? Where do I want the new compressed file to go? And what kind of file is it, right? And that's going to go, I forget if I need this. I'm going to keep it anyway, just in case. I think I do, because otherwise TypeScript gets really sensitive. There are likely better ways to like confirm that this is a valid media type beforehand, but it is what it is. I am going to get rid of this console.log file because we don't really need that anymore. We know that it works. So yeah, compress image. Where does the file come from? Where does the file go? How much compression and what kind of file is it, is what we're working with. And now in here, again, input path, output path, and this is like a one-to-one map. So where is it coming from? Where does it go? What quality do we want? And what is the media type? Okay. So we're going to create a Sharp instance, which is what the docs call it. You can see it returns a Sharp instance that can be used to chain operations, which is exactly what we want. So the Sharp constructor will take the input path, where is the current file, and now we have different functions depending on the file type. And this is important because before, when I was just using JPEG for my own testing, if I fed it a PNG file, it made like really nasty artifacts. Which, I mean, you're going to get anyway because we're compressing it, but it was like worse than what it should have been. So it's really important that we do this step. So all we're doing is, instead of a really long if-else chain, I'm implementing a switch, and we're saying if it's a PNG file, do the PNG one. If it's a JPEG, do the JPEG one. If it's a WebP, do the WebP one. If it's a GIF, based on the very quick little look that I did at the Sharp documentation, there isn't a super straightforward way of like just using the quality, for example, to like compress a GIF. So we're not doing anything. If it's a GIF is supplied, it will save the full and it will do nothing else. We're returning, which means it exits the function. Whereas all of these are breaks, which means they just exit the switch statement. Okay. So now that we've updated instance to tell it what kind of instance it is, i.e. PNG, JPEG, WebP, or GIF. How do you pronounce WebP? Is it WebP or is it WebP? Anyway, we're then going to say, this is, obviously this takes time, so it's a promise. So it's an asynchronous function. So I'm going to tell it explicitly, hey, I want to wait for this thing to finish. After it finishes, console.log to say it was successful. And if it's not successful and if there's an error, then it will get caught and we're going to console.log that instead. And now we get to the best bit where I delete the uploads folder and we run it all with all of the code in there. That's all of it. Thank you for making it this far. This is fantastic. Let's ts-node one more time. I'm going to share my Postman with you all, and I'm going to firstly re-upload the biggest file, which is Unsplash, which is again 3 megabytes at full. So we do that. We can see here, we go to get, we go to unsplash, splash.jpg. And again, we can see uploads has been created here with an unsplash folder and a full, hello full, and a min. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe my eyes are getting worse, but I can't see a huge difference. Like, you need to zoom in quite a bit to see all the JPEG artifacting. And that's considering you're about to see how much smaller it's gotten. It's insane. So unsplash.jpg, so by default, it'll get the full, which is again 2.92 megabytes, and it's taken 10 milliseconds to respond. Okay. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to go size equals to min. And now we can see it takes 4 milliseconds and it's less than 1 megabyte. It's only 735 kilobytes, which is awesome and fantastic and will load so much faster on a web page where we're trying to load lots of different images. So I think if we like scroll down here, particularly where there's some contrast, I think I noticed some banding and artifacting on here because there's quite a lot of like tonal change. If I go to the full, which I'm looking at now, it looks pretty clean as a JPEG is going to look anyway. If I go to the minified version, it does look like you can tell if you zoom in, like all these artifacts. I'm not sure if it will come through on YouTube's algorithm, but it does, like you can see it. But again, I'm pretty zoomed in, far more zoomed in than you would see as a preview. So we can see that worked. Let's upload some more stuff. So we got Unsplash. Let's upload our PNG and send. Awesome. And so we can see here that even though we've given it this date string, like it's loaded it perfectly fine as it should. It does mean that if we want to access it, and again, like feel free to customize all of this to your heart's content. I would need to like do this and then .png, and I can grab the size min, and all this file is. I didn't mean to do that. Oopsie days. I just want to make this a bit bigger. Yep. This was from my Persona 5 playthrough where I unlocked every achievement on Steam. Yeah, this is actually this whole video is a way for me to show off the fact that I did that. Anyway, so we have min, which is again 47 kilobytes, and the full, which is 243. And I mean, again, I can't see a huge difference in like render quality, which is cool. Like it works. It's exactly what we want. Awesome. So the last thing for us to do now is to go and chuck this into Docker, because getting this running on a Docker instance would be kind of cool. So for us to do that, there are some steps. There are some steps involved. And so the first thing that I want to do is create a new file. I'm going to call this a .docker ignore. And so the reason we're doing that is because when you deploy a Docker file, you really don't want to copy over all of your node modules. And I don't actually really want to copy over my .env either. So I'm going to ignore both of those files. I'm actually going to close source for now, which is all fine and good. Then I'm going to make another file, and this is going to be my Docker file. And so this is going to describe how to actually build the Docker container. And so what this is doing is we're saying, hey, go and use the latest build of Node that's being hosted in Docker. But then, I just realized I've already commented this, so like it's fine. Yep, you can read through this at your leisure. We're copying the package.json, package.lock.json, which are these files here. I'm actually just going to make sure. Yeah, I am still showing Postman. That's awesome. Sorry about that. So then we can see these two files, package.json and package-lock, which is all fine and good. We're going to install our dependencies. So this CI I just learned today is actually like clean install, which is kind of cool. We're doing dash production so that we don't get dev dependencies. You can also do omit equals dev. That is another way of doing it. I think it will give me a warning because I'm not doing that, but that's okay. We're then going to copy all the stuff that we want. And because in the server, I'll just split this, we do have this process.env.port. So this env port here is actually how we define like what port to use, because obviously we're not using env.local because we're building in Docker. And then obviously we want to expose that port so that we can actually query the server that we are throwing together. So what I'm going to do next, and I always forget how these go, so please bear with me while I copy this from somewhere else, is we need to do a Docker build. So that Docker build is going to be literally Docker build -t. So we're saying the tag is equal to file upload server and dot to say like the Docker file is in the current directory. So I'm going to run this. We can see it's doing all the things. If you don't have Docker installed, there's the warning. If you don't have Docker installed and running, this will not work. So if you're getting frustrated and confused because it's failing for you, make sure you have Docker installed and like actually turned on. I have had that happen once before, maybe more than once. And then what we want to do is we want to go and grab this one. So we're going to now run the container that we created on port 8080 with a port set to 3002. And this is just telling it which Docker container to actually build, which is the same as the name that we used before. Now I'm going to open Docker and ensure I haven't left my previous attempt running that I did when I was running through all of this to make sure I didn't do silly things when I was trying to show everyone. Okay, awesome. So I can run that. Uh-oh. You know what?
Wow, that was so much easier. So dumb. Okay, I've just created like JavaScript versions of every file, and now it is live on 3002.
Am I even sharing my screen? Oh no. Postman. Okay. All right, everyone. After that little hiccup, we can see now that I can upload to 8080 is where the Docker file is going. So what I ended up actually doing was I ran TSC on my project, which created a bunch of like JS files from my TS files. And that has resolved the issue I was having, the immediate issue of Docker saying like ts-node. It does not exist when it does. So I wouldn't like recommend doing this, like just figure out how to get it to work with Docker. But I'm running out of time for this evening. I want to get this published because I've been recording for an hour. So yeah, this is what I did. So I've changed, because those are all in there, we've repackaged, and I'm running Node with source set to server.js, which will work. It all works. If I head into Postman,
for the sake of demoing, like I can go nichijo.gif on 8080. I can do send, file uploaded successfully, which is awesome. And then when I can see that's been gotten here. If I then upload my Unsplash again, not my Unsplash, someone else's, we can go send, and we can go to unsplash.jpg, and we can, so we don't give it anything, it'll return full by default, and if we give it the size set to min, it'll give us the min. And we can see that because it's changed in file size here. We're going to have a really quick lessons learned section of this, which is like in DaVinci, don't speed up tracks, then unspeed them up, because you will need to redo all of your recording 3 times. Not the recording, the editing. Don't split your tracks before applying equalizers to them, because then you have to put it on every single one individually. And thank you very much for watching until now. Thank you. Until next time, that it hopefully goes a lot more smoothly, because I'm like fully aware this is not a perfect video, but I've had enough. So, yay. Cool. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.